Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Wavelength.
Just because we're doing our lectures online doesn't mean that we need to then retreat and make life, all about being alone.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide.
I think there's not enough knowledge around the severity of the long-term impacts that a concussion can give you, and it's not really educated enough.
You should be having.
The minimum job search requirements is definitely problematic, and it is up to a computer to decide whether you receive your payments each month.
This is Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. I'm alone in the studio tonight and it feels very weird, but I'm so glad that you are all here to keep me company. Before we jump in, we do need to acknowledge that we are recording Wavelength on the land of the Kaurna people and the Adelaide Plains and pay respects to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, and we acknowledge that there are continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. We also extend that respect to other Aboriginal language groups and other First Nations. I hope you've all had a brilliant week and kept warm all through those chilly days. I actually went and saw a dance show during the week called In a Mansion in the Dark at Karkaloo, and it was absolutely fantastic. Anyone that wants to go to any future Karkaloo events, I definitely recommend it. It has ended now, but it was absolutely amazing, breathtaking. I can't stop thinking about it. But let's jump right back in, shall we? This week we talk sensory hours in supermarkets with John Paul Drake, and later on we talk e-scooters in Wavelength Explains, and Jasmine takes you through all the good news that has happened this week. Right after the break, Marco talks to Emily Bourke, the Minister for Autism, about sensory hours. So here on Fresh, listening to Wavelength.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Recently, several supermarkets have implemented a sensory hour or quiet hour during the week. During this time, music is lowered and the lights dimmed, and the intention is to help people who are neurodivergent feel less sensory overload. To find out more, Marco speaks with Emily Bourke, the Minister for Autism. Take it away, Marco.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
So, Emily, can you tell us more about this initiative at Drake Supermarkets? What is it and what are the changes made to make it a quiet shopping time?
Yeah, well, this has come about from quite a fair bit of feedback through our strategy that we undertook just recently. We went around the community and asked the people to give their feedback about what they would like to see in our community change. And one of those things was having more quiet time in shopping centres. Because we know that some of our major supermarkets already provide quiet time between in the middle of the day, but they were looking for really to have that quiet time at hours at work for working autistic people as well. So we proposed to Drake that this was a really strong piece of feedback we were receiving, and that if we could do shopping hours after work is finished, it could be really well received. And all credit to Drake that they took this feedback on and started providing an opportunity for sensory and quiet time at their stores. So 2 of their stores at Hallett Cove and also out north in Golden Grove. And what it really looks like is, making sure that there's no beeping at the cash registers, making sure there's no music being played throughout the store, and also taking out half the lights so that, it's not as bright when you walk in and overwhelming. And again, to Drake's credit, is they worked with Autism SA to make sure that they could train their staff. So it wasn't, just doing the built environment change. It was really making sure that the staff are having the knowledge and the skills that people need to be able to support people that are autistic coming into the store. And for me, this is probably the most exciting part of this whole initiative, is that quite often when we work in retail, it's our first ever job. And now we have staff that are being trained in having more knowledge about how to be inclusive, how to work with people that might have a disability, and know now what autism is. So they'll carry that knowledge with them into school, because a lot of them are quite young. They'll carry that knowledge with them into their careers as they move forward. And some of them might go on to be employers themselves and have that knowledge with them. So that's a really important gift and investment to be giving to our young retail workers, but also our retail workers who have been in these roles for quite some time.
You have been appointed the very first ever Minister for Autism in Australia just less than a year ago. What were the highlights and what were the feelings in the last 12 months?
It has been an incredible experience. I think working with the community and getting to know so many members of the community has been a really amazing experience for me. It is the first time in the world that any government has put a sole member of their government have a responsibility for the autistic and autism community. So we are literally leading the world in this space. And for me, it is just getting to know the people, but also to start delivering on the voices that have been fighting for so very, very long. They've been asking for their voices to be heard, and now they are being heard. And just, 8 months ago, there was not a single autism inclusion teacher in any public primary school. There are 445 public primary schools in South Australia. Now 98% of them have an autism inclusion teacher in them. And for me, that's an incredible achievement that we can now start to get that knowledge into our classrooms. So that our teachers can provide the best environment for our students. But also, one of the things that I feel really excited about and get a bit emotional about sometimes is the fact that we have created for the first ever time, based on the feedback from our community, is people wanted a central location to go to, a non-biased central location that they could call upon when they're seeking knowledge and help and support. And we created the Office for Autism, and that's now not based in education, because we know that people are born autistic and they will pass away autistic. And we didn't put that new government agency, which is the first in the nation. Again, I think it's the first in the world. We didn't put that into Department of Human Services and Disability, because we know there is so much more to being autistic than focusing on the disability. So we put it in the heart of government, in the head of government, in the Department of Premier and of Cabinet. And this is a really important focus for us, because we know that we cannot make change unless we make change across all government agencies, because the state government is the largest employer in South Australia. And we cannot make change unless we work with the autistic community. So we made it a requirement that you need to be autistic to be the director of this new Office for Autism, and that you also need to be autistic if you were to be the advisor in your office. And I'm really excited to say that both our director and advisor started and are now they're ready to work and support the community. So we know we aren't just talking about change, we're getting on and making this change happen. I think that's what we're most excited about.
We are so excited to be part of this community, and thanks to you and your amazing work. Thank you very much, Emily. It's been a great pleasure to have you on Fresh.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Ciao for now.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Thank you so much for that, Marco and Emily. You have Wavelength all the way till 7 p.m. You're here on Fresh.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength. Just before the break, you heard Marco speak with Emily Bourke, the Minister of Autism, about sensory hours. To find out a little bit more, Ben speaks with John Paul Drake, the Director of Drake's, about the recent implementation of quiet hours in their stores.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
So I understand quiet time has been introduced at two Drake stores, being Golden Grove and Halla Cove. Can you explain what quiet time is and why it was introduced?
Quiet time is exactly what it is. We actually dim the lights and we get rid of the annoying beeping sound at the scanners, and we try to make it as good an experience possible for anyone, but more predominantly the people that are on the autistic spectrum.
Absolutely. And can you tell us the day and time that you've currently got quiet time available at the moment?
We're using Tuesdays between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. And this is at Golden Grove Drakes and Halla Cove Drakes. And that's where we'll be introducing quiet time, reducing sensory overload by turning off our in-store radio, PA calls, silencing the beep on the registers, turning down the lights and turning off all of our digital screens and getting rid of those real annoying beeps.
And why do you think it's important to understand and recognise the needs of shoppers with autism or that are on the spectrum?
As a supermarket, we recognise that we're an essential service that should be indiscriminately accessible to as many members of our community as possible. And 1 in 100 Australians are on the autism spectrum. And Drake's core values include providing all of our customers an outstanding shopping experience, supporting initiatives that reduces the challenges that some people face through providing an autism-friendly store is critical to that.
And how successful has this initiative been in these two stores throughout the trial period, and do you plan to introduce it to other stores?
It's too early to say how well it's gone, but In the short time we've been going, it's been very successful in sales for us, but it's also been very successful in the feedback that we're getting from everyone in the community. And it's not just people that are on the autism spectrum, it is actually our regular customers that seem to like the quiet time in stores. So if this all works out as good as it's going, we'll definitely look at rolling out more stores in the near future.
Yeah, of course. I think I've been to the shops where it's been dim and I haven't really known why, but no, it's good to really get that awareness as to why that might be the case. Have your staff gone through any additional training in relation to quiet time?
Absolutely. Our team have been provided with specialist training from Autism SA's team, for understanding autism and basic strategies for supporting the autism community. This includes clear communication with no assumptions like, do you want to buy a bag for 20 cents, compared with, are you after a bag today? Like anything, we can often find unfamiliar quite daunting. Autism inclusion training has provided our team with the confidence to better support inclusion and accessibility for the autistic community. Little changes like not making assumptions is a skill that is easily translated to all parts of our life.
Can you tell me more about the visual maps and sensory maps that have been created between Drake's and Autism SA?
The store guides provide information on what people can expect in our stores. Places where it might be a bit colder because of the fridges or freezers, which aisles might be a bit brighter than others, where the registers or the deli counters can be found, which areas of the store might be a bit busier than usual, as well as providing some visuals on where they can find popular items.
Like you said before, it's just the small things that do make a difference, and obviously these are going to be very helpful. Where can shoppers find more information about quiet time?
At drakes.com.au/quiet time.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide, you should be having Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Thank you so much for that, Ben and John Paul Drake. It was a really, really interesting interview, and I think it was really important to hear how much specialist training they have gone through as workers. It's really helpful for everybody. I don't think anyone's really complaining about not hearing those annoying buzzers in the supermarket. And for me personally, as a neurodivergent person, I get extremely overwhelmed in supermarkets sometimes, especially on busy days, like on the weekend. So having that opportunity to be able to go and feel a little less stressed, it's fantastic, and I'm so happy that it's happening in SA. Right after the break, we talk about e-scooters. Don't even think about going anywhere. You're listening to Wavelength here on Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Some people love them, some people hate them. But right now, I'm going to be talking you through e-scooters.
Wavelength explains on Fresh 92.7.
Electrical scooters or e-scooters have become popular in many cities around the world and offer a sustainable alternative transport option for short journeys. The Department for Infrastructure and Transport has just completed a survey from the community on whether they want the South Australian government to enable ongoing use of electrical scooters, electrical skateboards and other personal mobility devices on the road network in our state. Currently, only commercial e-scooters from companies like Neuron, Beam and Lime scooters are permitted for use under trial conditions that started in 2022. These trials are operating only in some areas of Adelaide CBD, North Adelaide, the city of Norwood, Payneham, St Peters, the city of Charles Sturt and the city of Unley under partnership between local councils and commercial e-scooter companies. If you own an e-scooter, you can ride it on private property, not on roads, footpaths or other public spaces. And if you are caught riding a privately owned e-scooter, you might be at risk for a fine for driving an unregistered and uninsured motor vehicle. The fine could be up to $1,401. Is it really worth the risk? Anyway, while the opposition is calling for something to happen sooner rather than later, changes could still be a while off, with the new laws unlikely to change until at least the end of the year. Hold tight, e-scooter owners, it's not your time just yet. Ciao for now.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide, you should be having Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Up next, we have heaps good news. Let's jump right back into the jams. You're listening to Wavelength here on Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength. It has been pretty bad weather outside this week. It's been kind of hard to be in a good mood, but don't worry, we have my favourite segment coming up. It is heaps good news. Jasmine, take it away.
Heaps good news on Wavelength.
Hey, it's Jasmine, and here's the heaps good news for this week. For those across SA, you may have spotted a decked-out wheelchair scooter passing through your town recently. That would be Bevan Kearsley from Queensland, who is on a 66-day journey across Australia in support of his organisation, the Miller Chase Foundation. The Miller Chase Foundation helps organisations like Spinal Life Australia to provide immediate support to people living with a disability while giving hope for their future. Bevan lives with a spinal cord injury due to a motorbike accident 30 years ago, but that has never stopped him from living. This fundraising journey raises monies for plans to build a rehab centre for spinal stroke and brain injury patients. Bevan started this journey on April 26 in Brisbane and stopped through SA between Mount Gambier, Port Augusta and St Gina about 2 weeks ago. It hasn't come with complete ease, as Bevan documents on his Instagram the daily struggles he has still had to deal with when it comes to the lack of simple, accessible facilities for where he stays, which in 2023 frankly is not good enough, but it's great that we have someone like Bevan calling this out. So far, over 4,000 of their $1 million goal has been raised, and you can find more info, donate yourself or follow his progress through his Instagram at Access Ozride. Young people living with disabilities in the Riverland are being taught confidence and social skills through a volunteer program at the Ranmark Paringa Community Museum. The Transition to Work program, created by local therapy hub Novita, runs fortnightly at the tourist attraction, where they help preserve the region's unique agricultural history. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, those with disabilities are twice as likely to be unemployed, so having these types of programs aims to help them find employment in the future. A netball club in the southeast and a disability services provider have created a new team for people of all abilities and genders. The Kingston Saints were reached out to by Director of Shine Your Way, Lisa Borden, who is mum to 15-year-old Regan, who has had issues participating in sports due to skill barriers. The club has warmly welcomed Regan and her teammates and has had their first game on May 11th. The S squad is going strong and hopes to be able to continue playing matches with other towns.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide, you should be having Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Thanks for that, Jasmine. And that brings us to the end of the show tonight. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the Wavelength podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. You can listen back to our old episodes right now, and tonight's episode will be up soon. Thank you all for keeping me company tonight. We'll see you next episode.
Wavelength.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.